Ready?
Pierre, how are you doing?
Doing fine. Good weather here in Paris today.
Oh, nice. You're lucky. Well, actually, here in Barcelona, it's pretty good too.
It's always the case.
So, after chasing and stalking you a bit online, I think that it's more than 20 years that you're in this B2B SaaS and tech environment. So, which is the biggest change that you notice in the field in the last, well, it's pretty much time, but what is the biggest thing that you would say, wow, that's been huge?
Well, if you think of it, there used to be a time when you were selling big software, big tickets, and then you were flying away, not sure it will really install or deploy. And I believe the big change over the last year has actually been with the emergence of SaaS. You can't really survive without clients' obsession. So now you're accountable for what you sell. It has to work. People have to adopt. You've got to follow that, because otherwise people won't keep your software, and for sure they won't deploy it, and for sure you won't sell again. So I like the fact that the responsibility, the accountability of what used to be called software vendors, with now the emergence of SaaS, is really something which makes sense to follow your customers. I mean, look at the invention of customer success managers. I mean, this is a role that didn't exist some time ago, and now you've got army of people which are here just to make sure the customer is happy. It's great.
Yeah. So how would you describe a good digital experience?
Good digital experience is pretty simple. It's first of all, it means you reach the objective that you have when you visit a site online or an app. That's obviously the thing, right? If you can't meet your objective, then why would you go there? The second thing, it's probably frictionless. So you want to have it as smooth as possible. And the third element, it needs to be engaging. Because if it's boring, guess what? It can be frictionless and you can meet your objective, but you won't take any pleasure. And probably you're going to go for a brand that's going to be more like it. It has to give you a positive feeling at the end of it.
Yeah, because actually the sales process in any kind of business, both B2B and B2C, at the end is something chemical. It's like the motion of the sale and the motion of buying something new, even if it's just a service, let's say.
Yes. And you need to be able to translate that online, right? And some people think it's easy. That people reach their objective, that it's frictionless, and it's eventually engaging, but it's not. Sometimes you pick the wrong content, sometimes the site simply doesn't work, sometimes your form has been designed for the desktop and you're actually on the mobile. And people believe that it's pretty simple to build good websites, but just think that Amazon is doing something like now 9,000 tests a year to improve their performance, but also the UX of their sites. So it lets you, I mean, you have to touch with this kind of numbers that it's an everyday process to keep it good and to make it even better.
Yeah, actually, now that you say this, with the growth of e-commerce, the number of data has like scaled in a way that we are testing and receiving hundreds of millions of data of everything. So
that's good.
How can we face this challenge? How can you choose the ones that are really important and the ones that are just like giving like bothering you actually?
Well, I mean, if you're a client, clearly privacy is at the center of everything these days, and you want to be able to give your clients, your prospects, the possibility to subscribe or unsubscribe very easily. The law around GDPR has changed that a bit, but there's still some work to be done because some brands really are sticky, and in the long run, it's not really good for them. But as a brand, right, as a B2B or B2C company that engage people online, then obviously that's a big risk. With ContentSquare, you used to have information about what people were doing. Now you know why. You've got a real analysis of what people feel about the site, and that can be overwhelming. So there's not that many choices, right? You've got to, if you say that data is the new oil, it's the oil for the digital economy, you've got to refine that. You've got to process it. Otherwise, it's just too big. So there's very simple ways to do this. The first thing is simplify. That's one of the big things today. Look at digital photography, for example, right? There used to be a time where you wanted to modify your photograph, and to get better at digital photography, you were using Photoshop. Well, Photoshop did a lot, but Instagram did much more for digital photography than Photoshop, because it taught billions of people over the planet how to take a decent picture and how to get better at taking pictures with the filters and with the trainings and with the tutorials. So it's a little bit the same for data today. If you're a brand and you need to improve your digital experience and you want to use data for that, you need to make it simple. You need to make sure that not just a few experts inside the company, but actually a lot of them are going to use your solution, which means simplicity, which means something which basically refines the data automatically for you to be able to extract what's meaningful out of the noise, which is huge. I mean, at ContentSquare, we extract trillions of interactions every week or every month. So you'd better be able to aggregate that and to make it simple for people to understand.
Now, you mentioned privacy, and it's something that it's hard to balance, because at the end you're kind of the big brother, because you're like watching what everybody's doing in their doing the performance of the website and so on. How can you give the trust to the customers to feel comfortable? Where's the line between too much and too less? And
so we first of all, we don't watch. First of all, we've got an engine that captures millions of sessions and averages that. We're not interested into an individual. We don't capture information, any personal information from an individual, but we look at thousands of individuals, hundreds of thousands of individuals, and it's actually the statistical value of those behaviors aggregated that tells you what people like, what people don't like, what works, what doesn't work. And actually, if you drill down to one individual, it doesn't mean anything. This is why we don't even do that. We can't even do that with the technology. But when you've got millions of people which have sometimes the same behavior on the same form, on the same button, which is called checkout, that doesn't work one every 2 times, then you know you've got a problem.
A big one, actually.
A big one. We detect that. I mean, you wouldn't believe, I mean, Cynthia, how many of examples like that of people that tested their website and still haven't been able to spot. They know something, it doesn't really work, but they don't know why. And it takes them sometimes days, sometimes even weeks to really figure out where is the issue you need to pinpoint.
Actually, I had recently an experience with that, because I bought like something and there were like really small lines with the different products. And at the very end, I just made a mistake of clicking one or the other, and it's been like, oh, I have to go back. And it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, think about that, right? We've been designing the web and the apps for desktop for years. So obviously people have understood now that because 2/3 of the traffic is now on mobile, you need to design those interfaces for mobile. But it's a real change. It's a real change because it's 8 times smaller. So you need to make very crisp choices about what you're going to put, what you're not going to put. And that's going to very much change the journey you're going to have. And sometimes you have designed the screens for a big iPhone, and actually on a small Android, it doesn't work the same. Sometimes you've got to tick that you're accepting the conditions. And sometimes if you don't tick that, it's not even appearing on your screen that you haven't ticked that. So making all those tested and obviously making them, for example, on 3G, on 4G, instead of doing it from a Wi-Fi, is an experience that every people that is in charge of e-commerce should do. And I can tell you they don't always do that.
Yeah, no, most of the time it's just like design and where I have to buy things to make them cheaper.
and you know what? In ContentSquare, if you ever come to our offices, you will still see people wearing the T-shirt from the early days of ContentSquare, which says, without data, it's just another opinion. And a lot of people have feelings about what's good for a user interface, for a good website. But now we've got data to be able to tell whether it's true or not. And that's probably the best way to make decisions.
Definitely. How can artificial intelligence help us with all that?
Yeah, so you were talking about this amount of data, right? So today, much more people than before are using solutions like ContentSquare to be able to understand what happened on their websites because they are easier to use. To make them even more easy to use, the step that we took 3 years ago was actually to be able to have our machine learning and artificial intelligence to learn from good patterns and bad patterns and to understand where friction points are appearing, where sessions are not going the way they should, and to be able to directly point the e-commerce teams, the digital teams, directly to those areas without even them having to look for them. So now in the morning, they receive an email, you should look into that, and they focus on those areas. By the way, we also, with our AI engine, quantify how much revenue that can mean if you're an e-commerce player, to tell you what you should do in the morning to not lose time in terms of searching, rather finding.
Is there a lot of difference on the behavior of people depending on the country they live in?
Yes, yes. A funny anecdote. We know that approximately 25% of the German people are actually reading the terms and conditions of websites. Which for some cultures like Southern Europe, talk Spain in particular, is probably nonsense.
Never read. I'm Italian, I live in Spain, and I never read the terms and conditions. I just click on the thing.
But you're probably much more attentive to the price, to the product. I mean, the number of pictures you read of a product is very different, for example, between Europe and Asia. In Asia, the consumption of images before picking up a product is usually between 4 and 6 times the amount that we Europeans tend to look into a website. Structure of the page is different, their journey is different. Obviously, you cannot just translate your websites if you want to go and start selling international.
Yeah, actually, I think that a really important part of the customer experience that we are always letting for the last is precisely the translation. Because they just hire a translator and they just give like a plain translation without thinking about more the marketing stuff or the way that people think and act. I think that's pretty much important.
We have some examples like that, and I can tell you, just translating your website, let's assume the translation has been done correct. Usually when you go to geographies with pretty different behaviors, it cuts your conversion rate in 2. So it's divided by 2. So same product, same prices into an environment where it hasn't been adapted, you divide your conversion rate by 2. And over time, as you work on the UX, as you work on the content, as you work on the journeys, you get back to the new normal, which is obviously the average rates for those countries.
That's crazy. I mean, I'm a translator and, well, I had a degree in translation. And I work sometimes with companies to help them adapt really bad translations. And
just that is very reassuring for customers, right?
Wow. And I have a question. Do you think that building a good digital experience in your website can also help you in your brick and mortar shops?
Yes. I mean, today, in most industries, right, the importance of the digital journey has become front and center. People say that digital experience is part of your brand. It is the new brand. The interactions you start having on social network, but also on the websites and on the apps, they're going to be the first touch sometimes you've got with a brand. So it has to be consistent with the shop experience. If you're a luxury brand and your website sucks, come on, how do you believe it's going to be consistent, and how do you believe people are going to, let's say, perceive the luxury you try to inspire with your website with the websites that doesn't work? So clearly there is a very, very strong connection, and they have to be congruent. Actually, they have to comply one with each other. Now, there is also one thing, right? People are always looking for physical shops for information about what people are going to buy. Well, you've got the best channel for knowing what people are looking for, what they like, what they don't like. If you can measure online what they are looking, what is attracting them, what they are hovering on, how much time they spend on this black dress versus this gray top, and obviously that should influence it. The best cases we have is indeed with some fashion retailers, where the digital team and the shops team are talking together every week to make sure that they are feeding each other with the feedback from actual people, which are either browsing the website and coming into the shop, and that they actually enrich themselves.
I think that this is one of the biggest changes in the last maybe 5 years, because before shops, well, brands used to have the online stock and the online products and the online stock for the shops, and they were completely different departments that they don't used to talk one to each other. And that was crazy, because when you needed something with all the omni-channel strategies, it changes everything.
Yeah, people have learned that's a failing strategy, right? I mean, over time, people want to go on digital if they are able to go digital, because they're in a place where they can't access to a shop. They will still want to have a shop experience, and clearly the two have to be very consistent in terms of approach. So it's not about the checkout today. It's about obviously the click and collect. It's about the easy reservation that will allow you obviously to get those people which are your fans online to also come to your shops. And we see a lot of digital native vertical brands actually going physical at a point in time, because it helps them even strengthen their link with those people which are fan of their brand, and obviously they strengthen that through physical. So we know that, right? Zoom is cool, but at the same time, the physical interaction is the salt of life.
Exactly. It's not the same virtual event. Like, for example, next week we have the digital. Actually, we are going to show this in premiere in the show, and it's going to have the physical part and the virtual part, that when you cannot reach the place for something, it's okay, but it's better the interaction. Have you been in a digital one-to-one so far?
What's that?
Have you ever came to a digital one-to-one event so far?
Yeah, sure.
So it's pretty good, right?
Yeah. I prefer them physical.
Yeah. So, well, I cannot skip the question. How was closing the 500 million round last 2 weeks ago?
It feels good. It feels good, not because of the money, very, very transparently, Cynthia. Just because it's a very strong endorsement of what we've been doing over the last 8 to 9 years at ContentSquare and 5 years and a half since I joined. We really believe in it, right? We're convinced we've got something big. We are convinced that the way you do analytics is not the way it should be done, that people don't have enough easy access to information to make decisions onto their websites and on their apps. And we've been passionately developing software and solutions, including this famous AI engine, to help people make better decisions. So when you see investors that show your look at your track record and decide that actually the future is ahead, that the past was good, but the future is even brighter, obviously it gives you a little bit of a boost, because you feel, wow, we're really onto something which is going to be probably one of the biggest European techs and probably one of the biggest technology shifts thanks to this platform in the next years. So it feels good. It feels good.
How did you celebrate
it?
How did you celebrate it?
Well, we didn't really, I must confess. Yeah, okay. We had an online event for everyone, and we talked about the rhino, which is one of the, let's say, the mascots of ContentSquare. This rhino now has a rainbow horn, because we believe, unicorns are fine, but they are not real. We prefer rhinos. So that was fun. But at the same time, it was not as good as the touchy-feely feeling you can have when you see everybody face-to-face. We had a little bit of meetings in our main offices across the world, but it was nothing as good as if we could really have a good party. But we plan for that when COVID is over.
Yeah, we can postpone it, and then you invite me and I come over. And I record everything.
Okay, note taken.
What are your plans for Spain in this next year or 2 years?
So we've got big plans, in the sense that, first of all, we were born just over the Pyrenees, right? So, in Paris, France. So there is a very strong connection between these two countries, and we couldn't focus the way we wanted to focus on it over the last years. One of the big reasons being the US. You can't thrive to be one of the players worldwide and not go to the US. But now that this is done, we can invest more, closer geographically to where we are. And this is why we've got big plans. We are hiring a full team. Laura came on board recently as our new country manager. She's working with the rest of the team, which is obviously either Spanish people living in Spain or actually Spanish people living in Paris, because we've got the capability to leverage the two hubs. But we really expect, Spain to become one of our top 5 geographies in Europe, hence the big investments. A lot of retail, a lot of banks, a lot of telecommunications, even some car makers. The travel industry is going to pick up at a point in time. Plenty of ingredients that makes it a very strong potential market for ContentSquare. And even though we don't have that many clients today, we've got something like 10 of them. They are very faithful, very loyal, and we leverage them a lot to be able to springboard our growth in Spain.
Happy to hear that. And the last question, what has been your best digital experience so far?
That's a real tough one. That's a real tough one.
That's why it's the last
one. Sites I really like. I don't know whether you know these guys in France called Back Market. They are recycling iPhones, phones in general. Very good experience. I like the tone. For me, it's the good combination of good UX that works, that gets you to your objective, which works. But at the same time, the tone is engaging. They break the codes for talking to you. and you feel a visit is going to be fun just because of how you're going to read either their ads or, by the way, their product descriptions. This is a good one. Another one which I like a lot is actually My Bank. I'm not going to cite them, not to do advertising here, but the work they've been doing on the app over the last years to start to nearly implement the kind of super app concept where you start to be not into your banking to look at your account, but everything money related you do into one place, and you constantly get back to these guys for insurance, for money, but also for a consolidated view of your accounts, for sharing money with your people, with your friends, with your family. Very smart way to approach that goes beyond the traditional banking concept, I'd say.
You mentioned something now about the tone, and I think that it's really interesting and an important subject, because many, for example, in digital solutions, it's really common as they're technological, as they're like really innovative stuff. They use really strange and weird words in order to explain all what they do in a really technical way. Is it needed, or we can just like translate this into white people to make it understandable and give just benefits?
You know what? I guess you and I know the answer. The problem is that people don't look at that because they don't have the tools to do this. So you write a full page of content with a couple of pictures onto your website, and you use traditional web analytics technologies. But what will they tell you? They will tell you where people have clicked. They will tell you the next page they've been at, but they won't tell you how much time you spend reading. And they won't tell you whether the sequence of page down this page is actually good or bad, because they don't really know that. Well, this is exactly where ContentSquare can help, right? It can help people that usually don't measure whether the words they use, whether their texts they write are performing or not, whether they do. So then you can start this continuous improvement. So then you're going to realize that the pages with a technical jargon doesn't work, and the ones which explain in very simple terms, very concise, very clear, with, by the way, a good picture or a small video on the side, perform significantly better.
That's great.
You've got the data to prove it.
Yeah, important data, and knowing what to analyze and where to focus the efforts at the end.
Yeah, I mean, one of the last features we released with ContentSquare is that it's called Insight, and it gives you this list of things we should absolutely look into, because either the page is not working, either your funnel is actually degraded by that page, either this piece of content is actually attracting a lot of clicks, but it's not performing eventually for e-commerce. So it gives you the hints about what we should look into so that you don't spend the whole day looking after it. That's
great. I think I'll investigate more about that. So thank you very much for your time, Pierre. It's been a pleasure interviewing you. And hope to see you soon in person and not just via the screen.
Looking forward to seeing you guys.
Thank you.
Real life.